Hello and welcome to another one of our Innovation Explained videos. Whenever you hear someone talking about innovation, odds are that they're talking about the disruptive and often technology-based forms of innovation, when in reality the vast majority of innovation out there in pretty much every company is much more mundane and incremental by nature. And I'd actually argue that it's the more important of the two. So today we'll shed some light on the incremental innovation, how it works, when to focus on it, as well as some practical tips for making the most out of it. Let's get started. Before diving any deeper, let's take a few seconds to define incremental innovation first. As the name suggests, it's simply the process of making gradual improvements to existing products, services, processes, methods, and even things like organizational structure. To make it a bit more practical, for something to count as an incremental innovation, it should be a change that creates some value and is at least in some way novel. Compared to other types of innovations, incremental innovations are usually quicker and easier to implement and involve less risk and uncertainty, as they don't generally require big leaps in technology or fundamentally new business models. And any one of these will have a pretty small impact on the market individually. To be honest, that sounds a bit boring, so let me start off with a couple of examples that hopefully help showcase how fundamentally important incremental innovation really is. Let's first talk about electric cars. Most people think of these as this huge disruptive innovation that is now taking the world by storm and has legacy car maker executives sweating. Well, did you know that they actually debuted in the late 1800s, well over 100 years ago, and were actually more popular than gas cars in the early 1900s? Well, for the next 100 or so years, the fortunes reversed, but as battery technology, electric motors, control electronics, software, as well as manufacturing technology have all gotten much better, the electric car is now making a pretty strong comeback. But while disruptive by nature, the electric car isn't one big innovation. It's a series of thousands and thousands of smaller incremental innovations across all of the areas mentioned above. Try looking at another big disruptive innovation and odds are that it's more or less the same story all over again. For example, the original iPhone put together many things that others had already innovated on, tweaked them a little bit, and then put them together in a nice package. But that first version wasn't even that successful. It still took a few more iterations and hundreds of incremental innovations for them to truly change the way we access and consume information. Even famous inventions like the light bulb weren't really one big innovation. In fact, Edison famously had to do more than 1,000 versions of it before he succeeded, each with small incremental changes from the previous version. And even after that successful invention, it took around 50 years and thousands of more innovations before most Americans actually had a light bulb. So incremental innovation isn't all that sexy and you won't see it grab the headlines anytime soon, and some don't even consider it real innovation, but any real innovator knows that it's incredibly powerful. And the reason for that is that the benefits from each incremental change and improvement compound, and if you can keep churning them out one after another over time, these will make a huge difference for the performance of an organization because they add up. Most organizations, of course, know this and are investing at least some efforts into incremental improvements and innovation. But the real question is, how much effort and resources should you really put into it compared to other forms of innovation? To figure that out, we'll look at two primary things: scale and maturity. Let's start with scale. If you invest a week's worth of work on a simple process innovation that automates 5 minutes of work from your employees every day, and you have 10 employees affected by the improvement, the investment will pay itself back in roughly 10 weeks. But if you had 1,000 employees affected by the same improvement, it pays for itself the same day. So the bigger the scale, the bigger the financial benefits from incremental innovation will be, and that obviously means that it will make sense to invest in implementing more and more of these incremental ideas you might have. The second thing to consider is maturity, and here we refer to the maturity of a product or even a part of your business. If we're thinking of new products, services, or businesses, there are often many unanswered questions that require significant changes. So before you get the big picture right, you shouldn't worry too much about incremental innovation. However, as we already discussed, once that big picture is right, you do need plenty of incremental innovation to make any product or business successful and reach real maturity and scale, just like our electric car example showcased. And again, even if you already have a mature product, service, or a business, incremental innovation can still move the needle for you big time if you just keep adding them up. The real impact will usually surprise you on the upside. So, in theory, incremental innovation is pretty straightforward and easy to understand, but in practice, it's not always clear how an organization should do it in practice. So we'll share a few practical tips. Large consumer services companies have plenty of direct contact with their customers through frontline staff members, support requests, and even customer complaints. In such cases, it makes sense to log such requirements and requests or complaints. And doing that systematically helps you spot systemic issues, prioritize them, and then prevent them from happening again by addressing those with incremental improvements of some kind. This can help you improve product quality and customer satisfaction, as well as reduce the effort needed for customer support. For example, we do this religiously at Viima with the help of our own software, and we now have less support requests than we used to have back when we had less than 1/10 the current number of organizations using our software. And many of our customers, like If Insurance, have also successfully used the same tactic with tremendous results. Another example is organizations with back office processes that take a lot of time for their employees. If some of these processes could be automated, it would save both time and money, freeing up some of the resources that could instead be used to create more value. Also, every organization probably wants to minimize waste, and if we think of a large-scale manufacturer or retailer, that's obviously even more important. When the volumes are high but margins low, even small changes in the amount of waste can make a huge impact on the bottom line. Here, improvements could come from a wide range of activities like better planning, better processes, or smarter technology. Another example. For a B2B business, sales performance is often a significant bottleneck. Thus, even small improvements in sales rep productivity and effectiveness can help accelerate the growth rate of the business dramatically. Better marketing materials, more convenient tools, as well as continuous training and benchmarking all typically help with sales productivity, and there's rarely one silver bullet there, but hundreds of small levers you could pull instead. Let's next go through a few best practices and tips for getting started that we found to be useful for many of our customers. First, identify the most likely targets of innovation. As there are so many things that could use improvement, it's important to just get started somewhere that can make a difference. It doesn't even have to be your biggest problem, as long as it's significant enough to move the needle. So, when you evaluate potential ideas, check that they have at least some value potential and can be feasibly implemented. Of course, the bigger the potential, the better. Second, try to move fast and to aim for measurable quick wins. This is important for getting the support of your organization, so make sure you can get a few of those in pretty soon after you start your initiative. Assuming you did get the support of your team and managers, the next step is to then systematize the work through predictable processes. One practical way to do this is to have each department or business unit be responsible for their own incremental innovations and then measure them on the impact they've achieved with that to make sure that they actually are working on it. Generally speaking, the larger the organization, the more decentralized your efforts should be, as centralized processes tend to create bottlenecks and unwanted bureaucracy, which will slow things down. Which actually brings us to our last point. If you are serious about innovation, you have to constantly accelerate the pace of change, or pace of innovation, as we like to call it. That is, of course, easier said than done, but working on improvements on a daily and weekly basis will make a tremendous difference in the long run, as we've demonstrated earlier. For this, you need to remove bottlenecks, educate people within the organization, provide good tools and best practices, as well as remove bureaucracy and give decision-making powers to those who can actually make things happen. To conclude, I'd just like to remind you that even though incremental innovation obviously isn't the most exciting or glamorous form of innovation, the payoff for being great at it and just churning out one innovation after another will be incredible. It's not really rocket science, you just need to figure out ways to be just a little better than you were yesterday. But with that, let's wrap it up. If you have any questions for us, please leave those in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you again in the next one.